Hello and how are you? Welcome to this tutorial in which shall be able to begin a new topic in mathematics, that is longitudes and latitudes. Before that, I would like us to have a word of prayer. Father in heaven, we invite you in this session that you may lead me as I administer the knowledge that I have in longitudes and latitudes, that the one who will be able to use this tutorial, I pray that Lord you be able to enable her to be able to understand. In Jesus' name I pray, Amen. Longitudes and latitudes, I believe those are not very new terms to you. So that's what basically we're going to look at, but in a mathematical perspective, that you can also apply it in normal life situation if you understand basically the concepts. So we're going to look at the following objectives. Those are what you should achieve by the end of the topic. You should be able to define the great and small circles in relation to the sphere, or that is including the Earth. So we shall look at what are great circles and small circles and be able to define them. We shall also establish the relationship between radii of small and great circles. Radii is simply plural of radius. I believe you know that as an English-speaking people, also from the lakeside. So basically, radii, the radius of a small circle and a great circle, shall look at the relationship. We shall also be able to locate a place on the Earth's surface in terms of latitudes and longitudes. Shall be able to do that in the course of the time. We should also be able to calculate the distance between 2 points along the great circle and small circles. That's in nautical miles and also in kilometers. That will be part of the calculation part, the numerical part. We should also be able to calculate time in relation to longitudes and also calculate speed in knots and kilometers per hour. So that is basically our objectives. You can be able to note them so that if any of them is not clear, you also raise an alarm. Directly looking at beginning with our course content, we want to begin with various terminologies. Number one, we need to understand that the Earth is spherical in shape. I believe this one was covered in geography very well when you were in Form 1. So the Earth is a sphere, is spherical in shape. So in this sphere, man has developed a means of how to be able to locate things. Notice, like for the graph, we shall have two ways of how to locate the graph if it's a two-dimensional graph. Two-dimensional in the sense that it has an x-axis and a y-axis. So basically the Earth has also ways of being able to position places. We position them in terms of latitudes and longitudes. And these latitudes and longitudes, they are simply lines in which they run either from North Pole to South Pole or from East to West. Now let's give a definition so that we may not just say lines, because hata mtoto akaponjus mo anajua what lines and whatever is. So all lines parallel to the longitude plane are called longitudes, and all lines parallel to the latitude plane are called latitudes. Now I've just been able to read something here. Longitude, they follow the longitudinal point from North Pole to South Pole. These are simply longitudes. They run from the North Pole to the South Pole. All these are what we term as longitudes. And they follow that longitudinal plane. Longitudinal plane, it simply means if I have another spherical Earth here, it will mean that this is the front part, then the back side, this is the plane. So they run across that plane. Yani ni make slice katikati hivi. So if I open it, will be in two halves like that. So this is north and this is south. So these are examples of longitudes. And latitudes, they follow the latitude plane. We have another diagram there. So this is the latitude plane. This is what we term as longitude plane, and this one here is the latitude plane. So after getting the latitude plane, there is all the lines that are drawn on the surface of the Earth that run parallel to that particular latitude plane are what we call latitudes. They run from east to the west. So what we term as latitudes. That. So along the 0 degrees. Now, before I go to 0 degrees, you may be wondering what I mean by 0 degrees. Notice, in this particular way, if I draw the latitude or whatever, if I slice this particular sphere along the longitude plane into halves, what angles will I be used to measure? What will be the maximum angle? So notice it will be in this manner. If I slice it, if I slice my sphere like this, along that latitude, I'll end up with this and that. That's if I focus it from the top. Okay? So assuming that that is the North Pole that I've sliced into two. It means if I measure all the angles here, I'll measure a total of 180 degrees. I'm reading from this particular point here, the top. Let me see if I can get you an practical example. So basically, I want to use this analogy of an orange. Here, I have two oranges. I'll use one to be able to explain the analogy of the latitudes and another one for longitudes. So basically, from biology, you can notice that we have these 2 points. We have the place whereby it's connected to the branch. It was connected to the branch, and then we have the scar, the branch and the scar. So basically, I'll use one for the latitudes and the longitudes, and we shall be able to explain that. So beginning with longitudes, here is the example. So looking very keenly, you shall notice that I've tried to be able to make some very good lines here which run across that longitudinal plane. So they'll run from the top part here and run all the way downwards. These are examples of longitudes. Now I would like you to see the longitudinal plane. Getting the book off, slicing it across the longitudinal plane, I simply mean this. So if I slice it here in that manner, any line that will run along the longitudinal plane, because I can cut it several times, you'll find that they'll form a particular, they'll be parallel lines because they never touch each other. They only meet at this particular pole, but they are parallel to the longitudinal plane. Now, I would like just us to reason something here. This being the longitudinal plane, and there's a common line that is usually called the Greenwich meridian. The Greenwich meridian, it's usually like the mean point of the longitudinal plane. Longitudes and latitudes are measured in terms of degrees. So, having the Greenwich meridian as the 0 degrees, how many degrees will I cover till I come back to that Greenwich meridian? So you'll notice that the total I'll cover here is 180 degrees. Now that's about the longitudes. I would like to explain about the latitudes. So this is a good example of latitudes. They'll run parallel to the longitudinal plane. So I'll give the example of the longitudinal plane, and the longitudinal plane on the Earth, being the mean position, this is what we call the equator. So this is the main plane that I'll use as my reference. Latitudes are also measured in terms of degrees. Which will be the maximum degree? Now notice, take care. Them being parallel to each other, I'll measure from here 0 degrees. Going upwards, up to this point, I'll meet the last latitude, not longitude, latitude. So, it being that, the moment I measure from here upwards, notice it will be the same as from here upwards, because it's a similar line that is running around the Earth, or around that sphere. So what will be the maximum degrees? From here upwards. That's perpendicular, it's 90 degrees. So basically, that's just explaining the analogy between of latitudes and longitudes. I believe that one helped. Let us pick up something small. So therefore, it means this will be latitudes and that will be longitudes. And we have found out that latitudes, they'll measure a maximum of from 0 degrees to 90 degrees, 0 being the equator. And longitudes, they'll measure from 0 degrees to 180 degrees, 0 degrees being what we call the Greenwich meridian, or what we call prime meridian. All of them simply mean the same line. Now, notice something when we were using the analogy of the orange as our Earth. Something that you'll notice very peculiar about the orange. You'll notice that we were saying that this particular plane, it marks the plane that we'll use to measure either the latitude or the longitude, depending with what we are working on. Now, I would like to ask Susan a bit, which is the specific point in which we use as the mean mark of measuring the angles? Notice it will be the center. Why? The longitudinal plane and the latitudinal plane, the two planes, run through a common center. Let us do an experiment and answer that. I'll begin with this one that we used as the longitudes. Notice I'll use the normal 0 equator mark. So that's what we have. If I slice it across, and to make also a very good center point, I slice it also across this longitude here. Now you'll notice something. There's a very good common center at where that knife is, where it's cut like this. So it means if I remove one segment, it means this is the point whereby we get that particular angles. It's the common center for what we have. So we have the latitudes and the longitudes. So where the longitudinal plane and the latitudinal plane meet is the common center in which all angles are measured from. So basically that will be our mean position whereby we'll be getting all our angles from as we journey on in this particular course. I'll also explain that mathematically, probably in our next tutorial, as we begin now looking at the Earth and dividing the Earth into very small segments. For this, I believe you have understood the concept between latitudes and longitudes and have gotten the definition. May God bless you.